In chapter 4, we looked at the income and substitution effects of a price increase, and we will apply that now to the labor market. If there's a wage increase, what effect will it have in terms of income effect and substitution effect? And then it will lead to, in fact, that a worker will work fewer hours because of the higher wage, and that is the income effect outweighs the substitution effect. Normally when there's a wage increase, then people will work more because of the higher wage, and that is a substitution effect. But also what happens, as you earn a higher salary, your real purchasing power increase. So you can buy more goods and services with your higher salary, and that is the income effect. So if you have problems to understand income and substitution effect, just go back to chapter 4. Now we will deal with the wage increase, and then because of the wage increase, you will see the two goods are work and leisure, right? And we assume that leisure is a normal good. And you know, based on what we've learned in the first year, when income increases and if the product is a normal good, the demand for that product will increase, and this will what will happen. If your wage increase, the demand for leisure will increase. So you will work fewer hours at the higher wage, because we assume that leisure is a normal good. So you know what is leisure and you know what is work. And you can just read through the chapter there as well on page 539 of the textbook. So what is important here, because of the income effect is greater than the substitution effect, it will lead to in exceptional cases, a backward bending supply curve of labor. Normally the supply of labor curve is upward sloping, which means that at higher wages people will supply more labor than at lower wages. So what is important here is that when we look at this diagram, figure 14.9, we will now distinguish between an income effect and a substitution effect of this wage increase. So you will see in this diagram that the backward bending supply curve of labor can result from the work-leisure decision that workers have to do. And it's not like in the firm case where the firm wants to maximize profit. Who supply labor? It's workers, and they want to maximize utility. So in this case, you can see what is being measured on the vertical axis. This is the hours of leisure per day, and the vertical axis is the income that is generated by work. Okay, and we assume that there are no other sources of income. Now, initially the wage rate is 10 Rand per hour, or $10 per hour, and based on that $10 per hour, the budget line is then PQ. That is based on this initial wage. And then, for example, point E, if you look at point P, remember 24 hours is the maximum hours that you can work per day. So if you look at point Q, that illustrates the maximum amount of leisure that you can have, 24 hours. So if you're at point P, you will then basically work the whole day and no leisure. And how to get to that 240, you take the 24 hours per day times the $10 per day. So if you're at point P, you work, your income will be $240 per day, right? Okay. So then a worker will earn 240. Now let's look at, you remember from maximizing utility from first year. It will be where the budget line is tangent to the highest indifference curve. Now where will the worker then utilize, if that is the case, if the rate per day is, or it's 10, then where will the worker then maximize utility? At point A, where the highest indifference curve is tangent to the budget constraint, as you can see in the figure there. So that is at point A. Now the worker will then maximize utility by choosing point A. Now at point A, how many hours will the worker work, and how many hours will be leisure, and how much will the worker earn? Now you will see at point A, it indicates 16 hours of leisure. So it means if the worker is at point A, the worker will enjoy 16 hours of leisure, and then minus 20 or 24 minus 16 gives you 8. So the worker will then work 8 hours per day, or 8 hours if they at point A, right? So if you take the 8 hours and you multiply it by the $10, which is the rate, then the total income for the worker will be $80, right? If it's at point A, okay? Now that is the initial wage. If the initial wage is $10, then the worker will then be at point A, utilizing utility or maximizing utility, and then the worker will work 8 hours and times 10, that gives you 80, and the leisure will be 16 hours. Now what happens now when the wage rate increases? And in terms of this example, the wage rate increased from $10 to $30 per hour. So what effect will that have on the budget line? Now the worker has got more money, and that is actually the income effect, because now the purchasing power of the worker's wage is now higher. It can buy more goods and services, which is the income effect. So what happens now with the budget line? It rotates to RQ. You can see RQ, it rotates from the horizontal intercept there now to RQ, okay? Because only 24 hours of leisure are possible. So the budget line rotates about the horizontal intercept to line RQ, which is the new budget line or budget constraint. Now if that happens, you can see how why it is doing like that, because only 24 hours of leisure are possible. You cannot have more than 24 hours a day. Now where will the worker now maximize utility? At point B, where the highest indifference curve is tangent to budget line RQ. And you know what is important, you will see an ancillary line here, which is the blue line, and then a broken budget line, which is RQ. Now that ancillary line is just to illustrate the new budget constraint, because the new budget constraint RQ must be parallel to the ancillary line, which means that only the income changed and not the price. If the price changed, then the slope of the budget constraint changed. But if the income changed, the slope remained the same, and then the new budget line is just parallel to the ancillary line, which is there to just get a new, it's just a line, a tool that the economists use to get to the new budget constraint, which is RQ. So now the consumer is at point B, okay? And at point B, 19 hours of leisure is being enjoyed by the consumer. So how many hours are being worked? 5 hours. 24 minus 19 gives you 5 hours of work. And if the consumer is now only working 5 hours in comparing with 8 hours at point A, but now 5 hours times 10 gives you 150. So the consumer is working only 5 hours now than the previous 8 hours, but is earning more. From $80 to $150, okay? So if there was only the substitution effect, then the consumer will be at point C. And then the consumer would have worked 12 hours of leisure and 12 hours, but there's 12 hours of leisure and 12 hours of work. But there's a substitution effect and an income effect. And the income effect is greater than the substitution effect. So the consumer will be now at point B and not at point C, okay? Now at point B, the consumer is earning a high income but working less hours, right? So it means that the consumer is working only 5 hours and have 19 hours of leisure. At point A, the consumer is working 8 hours and 16 hours of leisure and is only earning $80, while at point B, the consumer is earning $150, right? So what does this give you is that you can see the substitution effect and the income effect move in opposite directions. And it basically says that the income effect overcomes the substitution effect, and lowers the working day from 8 hours to 5 hours. And this is the reason why in some cases, if there's a wage increase, people work less hours. And this will give rise to what we call the backward bending supply curve of labor, as you can see here. And this arises when the income effect of the higher wage, which encourages more leisure. If people earn higher salaries, they want to spend more time on leisure, is greater than the substitution effect. And what is the substitution effect? If the higher wage comes into play, then people will work more. So the income effect is then greater than the substitution effect of the wage increase, and that means that in some cases the individual supply curve of labor, remember the individual supply curve of labor can sometimes be backward bending. And the reason for that is simply because what we have illustrated here in this diagram is that the reduction in working hours work arises because the income effect outweighs the substitution effect. And in this case, the supply curve of labor, the individual supply curve of labor, is backward bending. Thank you.